So continuing on the fossil fuel competency and the all of these other aspects that is actually inherent in fossil fuels, I am now still covering like the second learning objective in that same competency. So we're going to be talking about the economics of energy production now. So this is the cost. So this range here between 5 cents to around 16 cents per kilowatt hour is actually the average cost for fossil fuels. Okay. And we're talking about primarily about, in this case, we're not really talking about, in this case, fuel like cost. We're actually talking about household cost, like the use for households and industries for fossil fuels. Okay, so this has nothing to do with the gas that you put in your car or like any other moving thing anyway. So if you look at the cost here, there's out of the actual renewable, so we're comparing renewable sources of energy versus fossil fuels. They're actually quite comparable, actually cheaper than the actually average cost for fossil fuels. So it's actually within the range. So biomass, geothermal, obviously, hydroelectric, solar photovoltaic, and concentrated solar power. The only difference between these, ladies and gentlemen, is solar photovoltaic cells actually uses the reflective mirrors, and what you actually then is you actually store the energy into batteries. And concentrated solar power actually has a salt. You actually will probably see them. They actually have like a reflective, in this case, a reflective portion. It almost looks like the one that you actually use when you sunbathe. And what it does is the concentrated solar power then melts a salt. The melting of the salt creates a lot more energy add to that you can store in batteries as well. Okay, but that's different. Okay, offshore wind is actually wind turbines in like in this case off the coast. Okay, so we're talking about, you know, like we're actually talking about like out in the ocean, out in the sea, right, out in a lake. Okay, and onshore wind obviously is wind turbines you actually see dotting the landscape in land, right? So right now there's really no economic imperative for us to be using fossil fuels, right? Because most renewable like renewable fuels actually are comparable or even cheaper than the fossil fuel average. Okay. Obviously, the big problem here is batteries and the way that we actually store energy from these actual things. So we're going to be talking about that. So another economics. Now we're going to be talking about fuel like efficiency now in terms of vehicles here. So we have 2010 and 2025. So this is forecasted. So the solid lines, okay. All right, the solid lines are miles per gallon. All right, so this solid lines is based on the left y-axis, okay, which is in miles per gallon, and the dotted lines is based upon the numbers on the right y-axis. Right. So if you look at a standard gasoline engine here, so MPGs, it was, and this is again, we're talking about a four-door mid-sized passenger car, so it's like a Toyota Camry. We're probably not, you know, so that kind of like a Honda Accord. Okay, those are the only two cars I know about that, and that's mid-sized passenger car fuel. Okay, what happens is in 2010, they approximately have like MPGs, and I don't know how accurate this is, to tell you honestly. I think this is just an average of all mid-sized passenger cars is around like almost 40 miles per gallon. I'm thinking they're talking more about like the smaller four-door cars here. But anyway, and it's forecasted that in the year 2025, we will actually attain around 50 miles per gallon. All right, hybrid electric, we obviously can see that it started around 50 and now we're forecasting it to be around 70 miles per gallon in 2025, so on and so forth. So again, solid lines on this side. The cost of the standard gasoline engine, however, has remained constant. So if you look at it, the standard gasoline mid-sized passenger car fuel like type, again, is going to be, the average cost is going to be close to $30,000. All right, as you can see, electric vehicles here, way up, right, way around. I don't know where they got this 40,000, because I know for a fact that a Tesla doesn't cost $40,000. But anyway, I digress. All right, and so that's this one. All right, so you get different types of plug-in hybrid electric. And again, this means to say it's 100% electric, 40% electric, 10% electric, right? And then this is basically on-demand electric, hybrid electric, meaning to say that it depends on what you're doing. If you press on the accelerator, you probably are going to be using gasoline. If you are idling, you'll probably be using the electric portion, okay, of that. Okay, so that's basically what that means to say. So 100% of the time it's electric, 40% of the time electric, 10% again, so on and so forth. But as you can see, in terms of economics, the standard gasoline engine has remained flat, right? And again, it might go up as makers have become a little bit more efficient in the design phase. But as we can see that the higher the fuel efficiency, the more expensive it is. However, as you can see, it's going to be declined. The electric vehicle prices are actually declining, right? And that is primarily because of in this case, subsidies is actually one of them, right? So the government can actually pay like money, so they're probably like taking rebates as well into account here. But so again, there is a slight economic imperative to actually buy a standard gasoline engine versus a full electric vehicle, all right? And obviously the actual mileage that you can actually drive an electric vehicle is actually obviously less, and obviously the infrastructure in which you can actually refill your electric vehicle, recharge your electric vehicle, or refill your standard gasoline engine is actually quite different things. And so there are other factors that has to be involved in what is driving us to remain embedded in the standard combustion engine, internal combustion engine, rather than going into in this case, an electric vehicle. All right, but the cost is coming down. But so who knows? Maybe in a few years' time, everyone will be driving a Tesla. Sad thing, however, is the Volt actually has been discontinued in its manufacture, and the reason why that is it hasn't been making any money. It's actually Chevrolet has been making more money from selling trucks. Unluckily, that's the case, right? So that's one thing. So now we're at the last part of that learning objective, which is the social aspect of fossil fuel use. And why do we keep using fossil fuels, right? Why do we keep driving cars? Okay, why do we keep, and what happens is we don't really have a good public transportation system, right? Just imagine if you commute from Cleveland, I'm sorry, not from Cleveland, from Manitowoc or Sheboygan to the Cleveland campus, there is no bus line. We have this school bus that drives between the campuses, and it takes you forever to wait for it. Okay, so that's one problem, right? So we don't really have a good public transportation system, so there's no incentive for us to discard our cars and just use a bus or use a railroad or and using the railroad is actually quite expensive as well. The other thing obviously is size. The United States is a huge country, so to go from across the country is quite like a haul, right? So it takes you a few days to go from California all the way to New York. Whereas in Europe, like all the countries are relatively small, you could probably drive across like the Netherlands. You can probably drive across for like in less than 2 hours, right? So again, there's also like different imperatives in this case, right? The other thing is in a lot of other countries, public energy providers are non-for-profit. They're actually truly public utility companies, meaning to say that they're co-ops, meaning to say that the company is actually beholden to the people that they serve. Whereas in the United States, We Energies is a private company, right? They answer to like stockholders, to owners, okay, to like, but not generally to us. All right. The other thing is fossil fuel industries have very good marketing strategies to make sure that you're hooked. So again, this is one of the reasons why we as people actually have kind of not gotten into the public transportation or any idea of this other renewable sources of energy. Okay. FYI, if you live in a big city, like if you live in New York and you don't have a lot of money, it's cheaper for you to actually use the public transportation, and it's expensive for you to park your car. So it's actually like you live in Brooklyn, especially if you live in Manhattan, right? Obviously you have a lot of money there. But if you live in Brooklyn, which is a much more, kind of like a relatively speaking cost-effective area of New York, what happens is it's just expensive for you to have a car, right? Same thing in Chicago, right? So again, it also depends on where you live in this case. All right, so that's that. So now we're talking about the third, so like the third learning objective, which is models of energy conservation. How do you actually conserve energy in this case, and why is energy conservation required? So the internal combustion engine, the way that works is thermal energy. Okay, so in this case, the spark plug, in this case, creating that spark that actually then creates this flame that actually then sets off air and actually gasoline into, in this case, to detonate, okay, drives the internal combustion engine. What happens is gasoline and air does not get directly, so that thermal energy, that heat energy, gets transformed into mechanical energy, and that mechanical energy then what drives the pistons, and then obviously that is actually what drives that actually transfer the energy from your in this case from your powertrain to your drivetrain. Okay, the problem with any time that you transform energy, whether it's from one form to another, from like thermal to mechanical energy, it is never 100% efficient, right? So what happens is there's a lot of waste. So if you see at the schematic right down on the bottom here, what happens is if we're trying to create, let's say, light energy for a light bulb, a lot of that energy then gets transformed into heat, which is what we don't want. This is waste. We're not utilizing this energy. We're only using that much energy. So this process here is only 10% efficient. So, and the reason why energy transformations again is inefficient, is relatively inefficient, is because anytime you transform from one form of energy to another, you're always going to lose some of that energy. It could be heat, sound, and light, and these are actually useless energy, right? So that's actually one of the problems in this case. If you ever like touched your, like if you ever felt like you're like your car engine in this case, when you're driving, like after like a few hours, you can sense that it's very, very hot, and that obviously creates a lot of waste. All right. So that's the problem why energy conservation is actually very, very important. Now, for potential of energy conservation by sectors, okay, industries, and then in this case we were talking about industries, we're actually talking about in this case plants, okay, plants that manufacture, like in this case, let's say steel products or anything like that. The potential to save energy in that in industries is quite low, right? However, the biggest areas in which we can actually get savings and which we can actually conserve energy is actually in lighting, residential lighting, 50%. So there's actually a way for us to actually save 50% more energy, and public heating and cooling. And we're talking about like malls, Lakeshore Technical College, okay, so where we are right now, we can actually save 50%, all right? And transportation to some regard is 10 to 20%. Now, 50%, that's a big jump, right? So imagine if every household in the United States switches from incandescent light bulbs or compact fluorescent light bulbs into LED lights, right? Could you imagine the energy potential there? The energy savings potential is quite huge, all right? So, and FYI, the reason why LED lights are so much more efficient than incandescent light bulbs is by cutting down the amount of heat that is lost. I don't know if you know this, an incandescent light bulb is actually, you actually have a filament that looks like this, which is inside a light bulb. And what happens is, like there's an electrical flow here. This basically then like sets off light, and a lot of this, and if you ever touch an incandescent light bulb, you actually can burn yourself. In a LED light bulb, what happens is they have done a great way, and what you actually do in a light emitting diode is you actually make this, instead of one huge thing, it's actually a lot of small filaments, if you want to think about it. And if you make them smaller, in this case, they emit less heat, and if they emit less heat, guess what? You save energy that way. So that is an energy conservation. Obviously, transportation is a big thing, especially public transportation. If you transform all of the buses into like either hydrogen or electric buses, that would be great as well. Bad news, the big electric bus manufacturer is actually in China, not in the United States. So that is kind of like a bad news for us. So just remember that there's a lot of potential in our households.